We good? I thought that today we would look at a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of our, or perhaps our most important text. We'll go over we'll give a translation and then we'll discuss it in some detail. The verse begins, Kim pramatasya bahubi parokshai hayanai iha. It's a rhetorical question. Kim is the standard Sanskrit interrogative. It means what? And it gets turned into like what, where, how, why, and when. So it's the Kim, Kutra, Kata. It's morphed into all these other words, but it's the basic interrogative. And so the verse starts out, what? What Kim pramatasya bahubi? What of the ignorant, of the bewildered, of their many years? Hayanai bahubi, of many years of their lives. In other words, what's the value of a lifetime of ignorance? Kim pramatasya bahubi parokshai hayanai iha. What is the value of many years spent in ignorance? Paroksha, inexperienced. Paroksha means para aksha, beyond your eyes. That which is beyond your eyes, that's paroksha. And so it means, what's the value of an inexperienced life, even if you live for many years, if you don't do much of substance with your life? What's the value of it? It's a strong opening. The verse. C.S. Lewis, he wrote a book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And he said that he likes Hindus, but he can never get them to commit to any position. So no matter what he says, they'll go along with and agree with him. C.S. Lewis was a super famous author and also like a really devout Christian. He was English. And he would have had a lot of experience dealing with the diaspora Indian population in England. And his experience with the neo-Hindu intellectuals he mixed with was that whatever he would say, they would agree with and go along with. And I think that that's kind of a fairly standard assessment of what goes on under the name of Hinduism these days. Just do your best, sir. Son, shh. Dad, no, it's not my job. It's your job. You do your best, and then you've driven all the way here, so no problem. But you don't get to just be shanti and let your kid make noise. Okay. You have to work. Do your best. I think that this is a fairly standard assessment of modern neo-Hindu intellectuals. That they just sort of go along with whatever. And almost, having a conversation with them is almost like a tautological proposition. Whatever you say, they go along with, and it's almost like they're Teflon. There's nothing you can grab a hold of in terms of defining what it is they believe, what it is they don't believe. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'll give you a listen to Deepak Chopra talk. You could, practically speaking, put together a random spiritual word generator and plug in 1,000 words and just have those words put together in combinations of 3 or 5, and it would be the statements he makes. Almost like Yoda. If you watch the Star Wars sagas and you listen to Yoda talk, he sounds almost like a neo-Hindu intellectual. Anyway, so C.S. Lewis made this observation. He was obviously not familiar with classical Indian polemics. within Indic philosophy, people have taken very strong, well-established positions and argued for them in a sustained way for thousands of years. And this verse would be a representation of that, crystallized, almost fierce, challenging, extremely thoughtful and astute spiritualism. What is the value of your long life just lived? Lives of quiet. Most men live lives of quiet desperation. What's the value of your inexperienced, foolish, going along with the flow, taking the path of least resistance, taking the road most traveled, doing what everybody else does, going where the wind blows you, not taking a stand? All that it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. So so it's a critique of that. It's a very strong word. It's very strongly worded, and it's piercing and harsh, and it flies in the face of most people's understanding of the enigmatic and vague, indefinite position of Hinduism. Do you guys follow that? All right, so we're in the thick of it here. What is the value of your life, of someone's life, that's inexperienced, that's meager, that's paltry, that's just spent in a life of quiet desperation, putting food in your mouth, putting food on the table? What's the value of that? Even if you live for many, many years, how is that significant? How is that profound? How is that meaningful? I think at this point we can mention that human beings, as mammals, have a lot of stuff in common with other mammals. And in fact, we're social mammals. So we live in groups, we have hierarchies, we depend on one another. That depending on one another allows us to live a better life, just like animals in packs depend on one another, and that helps them to hunt and forage and live more successfully. You can compare us to chimpanzees or wolves or whatever social mammal, whatever social primate you want to. But what distinguishes us, what distinguishes human beings from other animals? Non-rhetorical question. What distinguishes human beings from other animals? Yeah. Now, are animals conscious? It's an interesting question. Just before you answer, slow down. Well, I want to hear your answer, but I want everybody to contemplate it for a second. Are animals conscious? Something to think about. Are animals conscious? For most of recorded history, most people in the world did not believe that animals were conscious. They were kind of like chairs that moved around. In fact, for a lot of recorded history, human beings that weren't your color weren't considered to really be conscious fully. And that's why we had things like chattel slavery. If you look at like ancient Rome or Egypt, they had slavery, but the slaves had some rights. They were attenuated. They weren't the full rights of citizens, but they had some rights. In the U.S., up until the mid-1860s, we had a form of slavery called chattel slavery, which meant that you could do anything to a slave that you wanted to with no repercussions whatsoever. You could, for example, dismember a slave for fun on a weekend because you felt like it. And they had no rights whatsoever. It was like owning a piece of furniture. And if you look at the justification for that given by people who believed in slavery a century and a half ago in this country, they spoke about other human beings who were not the right color as being no different than property. That's why it was chattel slavery. You actually just owned it outright, no rights. There was nothing different than owning that or a chair or a skateboard. It's sickening, and it's also vexing How could people have done that? What to speak of what we thought of animals? We also have, there's the Animal Welfare Act that was passed in 1965 by the federal government. And that's usually superseded in every, not usually, it's always superseded in every state by further rights that animals have. And in fact, in California, for example, it's illegal to leave your dog locked in a car with the windows rolled up. It's also illegal to beat an animal. If you beat an animal in California, they can call the police and the police will arrest you. In, I think, 38 states, it's a felony to beat an animal. You know, to a certain extent. If you beat like an animal very, very mercilessly, it can be a felony, carrying with it jail time. So we, as a country, federally have decided animals have rights. That's why we pass acts like the Animal Welfare Act. We then also, the states individually, have all decided animals have even more rights than the baseline of the federal government. And so each state has further statutes. In most of them, it can be a felony to assault or beat or harm an animal too severely. And in fact, sometimes just neglect of an animal, leaving it in the car with the doors locked up, with the windows rolled up, can be a crime. And the police will come and break the window of your vehicle and rescue the animal. Does anybody see the irony here? Or the super weird thing that doesn't make any sense? Or the massive contradiction in terms? What is it?
You allow slaughterhouses.
We have exceptions in all of our legal codes concerning the rights of animals that we can reclassify them as a commodity and then all their rights go out the window. And so even today in this country, legally, we have the ability to treat animals like chattel. And there's a baseline that animals do have rights. And then we have a cutout. We have a cutout. We have a caveat. And that allows people to do whatever they want to animals, and we can reclassify them as a commodity and justify almost any treatment imaginable. It's like a massive cognitive dissonance of how on one hand we can value and appreciate and acknowledge that animals have some innate worth, and on the other hand we can just summarily reject it and objectify them. They call it the meat paradox. Sociologists study it. If you tell somebody, would you like to eat cow or chicken, they pick the vegetarian option. If you tell somebody, would you like to eat beef or poultry, they'll pick that option. They've done studies of this. People become really uncomfortable when you start to make them think about the animal that the foodstuff they're eating ultimately comes from. Paul McCartney, what was he? Was he the bass player? He was a bass player of the Beatles, and a singer, part-time singer, full-time bass player of the Beatles, who's a radical vegan. His daughter is a super radical vegan who makes high fashion, haute couture, Stella McCartney. But anyway, Paul McCartney is a huge vegan, and he made a movie 10 years back. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's about 12 minutes. Called If Slaughterhouses Had Glass Walls. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, then everybody would be vegetarian. And if you think about what we do in supermarkets and the like, if you go to a supermarket or like a wet market in India, for instance, which they exist, they're there. They're usually in the Muslim part of town. Not usually. They're always in the Muslim part of town. They'll have live animals and then animals with their heads cut off and then animals half cut up, and you go up there. There's generally no refrigeration, and you have to sell the animal the same exact day, and the whole place smells really nasty because the rot starts to set in right away. You know you're in that part of town just driving down the street. But we don't have that here. We have these refrigerated sections. If you ever noticed, the whole perimeter of a grocery store is refrigerated. And then they have the non-refrigerated items in the middle. So you'll have all along the walls. You'll have your refrigerated sections. We have everything packaged nicely. And it's not gray because they add color to it, and they put it in packages, and they dissect it from its source so that you don't really think too much about what you're doing. And human beings have a discomfiture eating animals when they know that they're eating animals, and the more you process the flesh, the less repugnant it becomes, and the more easy it is for people to not feel cognitive dissonance or contradiction in their value system. On one hand, they want to eat meat. On the other hand, they value life. That creates a cognitive dissonance, and people become uncomfortable, and it has to be resolved. And one of the ways we help to resolve it is we mask the suffering. We mask the life and the worth and the individuality and the fact that animals look just like your dog or your cat that you would never imagine killing. And in this way, most of the population, 90+% of the population in the U.S., is able to just turn a blind eye and not think about it too much. So for most of recorded history, people did not think that animals were conscious. And for most of recorded history, human beings who believed in slavery even managed to think that other human beings didn't have consciousness. And that led them to allowing for animals, and even humans in some instances, to be treated as chattel, as a commodity. And we have a bizarre, illogical, strange, easy to poke holes in set of legal codes around animal rights in this country at the federal and state level that simultaneously values and devalues animals based on how we choose to classify them, not based on their, let's say, C neuron fibers and their pain receptors and their ability to experience pain like human beings do, or their, central nervous system, or what have you. So, do animals have consciousness? Might seem like an obvious question and answer to us, but for most of recorded history, for most of the world, the answer was no. Anyway, back to you, sir. Do animals have consciousness?
Yes.
They do, right? Yeah. And so consciousness does not distinguish us from animals. But we're on the path. We're moving in the right direction. What is it that distinguishes human beings from animals? Yes.
Animals can't inquire about God.
Yeah, the level of consciousness of human beings is more than animals. We have gymongous brains compared to our bodies. We have language. And we have something called recursion within language. Recursion is the ability to stack one prepositional phrase on top of another and still make sense. Let me give you an example. I went to the temple with my family to give a class and attend the program with my friends and family and members of the congregation on Sunday at 6 o'clock in Laguna Beach on May 22nd. Did you see how many ideas I attached to one another? And I made a run-on sentence, but the sentence was easily understandable by everybody. Because human beings have the ability to have very complicated, recursive thought where you stack an idea on top of another idea and you're able to say really definitive and specific things and people are able to follow you. Animals make sounds and grunts and so on and so forth, but they're not writing books. They're not speaking with recursion. They're not inquiring about the absolute. The famous Brahma Sutras start off, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Jamadi Yasayataha Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, right now, inquire about Brahman. What is Brahman? Brahman is that from which everything comes. And so the sutras start off telling you, instructing you, now, right now, atta, now, right now, inquire, Brahma Jigyasa, inquire about Brahman. What is Brahman? Brahman is that thing from which everything else comes. Brahman is the deity. Brahman is the source. And so this innate ability that human beings possess to inquire about the nature of their existence, to feel existential angst, to think, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? This differentiates us from all the other social mammals that in other ways we are very, very similar to them. They eat and sleep and mate, they defend, they protect, they pass on their gene pool. They have us and them societies, natural enemies. They have natural allies. Symbiosis and mutualism exists. Parasitic culture. All these things that you find in human culture, they also exist in animal culture. Helping one another, so on and so forth. Love, even. But there's something extra that we can do. We can deeply think about the purpose of life. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? We can have an existential crisis. We can think about, ponder the existential dilemma, the radical paradoxical contradiction that I'm in a body which is going to die in a few years, in a few decades, but I have an almost unlimited capacity to think and feel and love and experience. And why am I, a conscious self, seemingly without limits in many ways, put into a cage? C.S. Lewis also is famous for saying, you don't have a body. You don't have a soul. My soul. You don't have a soul. You have a body. You are a soul. He made this really nice point that we wholeheartedly agree with. So how is it that I, as a conscious self, in many ways unlimited and capable of like unlimited potential in terms of thought and feeling, am now thrown into a body that severely curtails and limits my abilities? What's up with that? How do I contend with that? How do I deal with the fact that my whole sandcastle is going to get washed away by the tide? And I think that's what you meant when you said consciousness. You meant conscious with a capital C as opposed to conscious with a lowercase c. So I knew you meant it. I just wanted to flesh it out for everybody. Kim pramatasya bahubi parokshai hayanai iha. What is the value of your life if what you do with your life is no different really than what animals do? Maybe you wear a shirt and a tie or a dress. Maybe you keep your... maybe we develop a bartering system based on gold or another precious metal or an electronic system, and we're able to trade and barter items in a more sophisticated way. But what is it exactly that you're doing if all you're doing with your life is putting food in your mouth and the mouths of your family? A lot of times people are so lame at this point in society that if somebody just raises their children and doesn't divorce and doesn't neglect their children in some kind of criminal fashion and puts food on the table, we almost want to give somebody a participation trophy and a gold star just for doing that because it's so rare. It's strange. But like the bar has been set so low that just doing that, he's like a saint. She's like a saint. They managed to stay married. Something that, is just totally normative. Like that's like some kind of big achievement. You get a gold star for that. Your kids didn't wind up in jail, or nobody died or something like we're just rolling out the red carpet. Have a Shania band for you. This isn't a group where that was enough. This doesn't represent the thoughts of a group of people where that was considered to be sufficient in and of itself to consider your life to have been successful. What's the value of your life if all you're doing is just eating and sleeping and enjoying and rolling around and just in a very inexperienced, infantile, childish way. Varam muhurtam viditam gatate. Sreyas say, yata. Better, varam, better than that long life of many years. Muhurtam viditam is one moment, one muhurta. A muhurta is 48 minutes. Better a few moments, a half an hour, viditam, of knowledge. Better a half an hour of knowledge. Better a moment of knowledge. Yatata, by which gatata Sreyas say, by which you can search after the ultimate benefit, the ultimate goal. Varam muhurtam viditam gatate Sreyas say yataha. Better one moment of consciousness by which you will be inspired to begin the great journey of searching after what is ultimately valuable. The formal study of value is called axiology. There's two ways people value things. One is they consider something to be good, and that's ethics. What is good? The other one is you figure out what is beautiful, and that's aesthetics. Those two fields, ethics or moral philosophy and aesthetics, were turned into one field because people figured out at a certain point that both those things are about assigning value to something. This is valuable, ergo, I'm going to pursue it. I'm going to strive for this. This is what gatate, by which you strive for, which you reach out for. Gut means to reach out or strive. Gatate, by which one reaches out or strives for something, is what the verse is saying. And so if you're striving for something, it means you value it. It means you value it. So if you want to know what people value, look at what they're doing and they'll tell you what they value. We say things like, your actions speak so loud I can't hear what you're saying. Or we tell people to walk their talk. Or we tell people that example is better than precept. If you want to know what people value, you can, in many ways, stop listening to them and you can just watch what they spend their day doing. And they'll speak volumes about what they value, based on what they pursue and practically demonstrate they value as they move through this world. And so, in many ways, the spiritual journey for anyone, anywhere, at any time, is when somebody thinks about the nature of this world and decides, the self, the soul, consciousness, divinity has value enough that it motivates you to dedicate your life to pursuing it. And so instead of just wandering around in this world, eating and sleeping in as fancy a way as possible, you curb that to some extent. And you introspect, you look within. Intra, within, spect, to see, like spectacle. You introspect and you look within and you look beyond this world and you look for some higher principle, higher truth, greater sense of purpose in life than just maintaining yourself. And actually, everybody does this. It's very rare that you meet a totally self-absorbed person over the age of 7 or 8. All children are, practically speaking, narcissistic. They lack impulse control. They're totally self-absorbed. You know, sometimes my daughter will drop my phone. She'll be bringing my phone. She'll drop it on my face. Like I'm laying down, she brings it over to me, and she drops it on my face by accident. And I'm like, ah! And she starts crying. And I have to be like, it's okay. I'm okay. Like maybe I'm bleeding a little bit. I got a black eye. I'm like, it's okay. It's all right. I have to pat her on the back, give her a bowl of vegan ice cream, tell her it's going to be okay. Because she dropped the phone on my face and gave me a black eye. And I have 6 kids. I've gone through this with all of them. When adults behave in a totally self-absorbed way, then we label them with NPD. We tell them they got a narcissistic personality disorder. But children are just naturally self-absorbed as they grow up and their brains expand and they go through developmental phases of psychology. They gradually become capable of deeper and deeper levels of selflessness and consideration when moving in the world. Isn't it, doctor? It's funny, isn't it? She has a PhD in psychiatry. Just an MB. Okay. Most people you meet have a higher sense of what they're doing. People join the military. People join a club. People join a group. Even when people join a gang, they're living for something beyond just themselves. There's a gang in Australia. My wife's from Australia. A surf gang. But they all did jiu-jitsu. Guns are illegal in Australia, so people actually have to fight. They can't just shoot each other. So they realized that all the jiu-jitsukas on the beach were beating them up. So they all started taking jiu-jitsu. And they all got tattooed on their neck, "My brother's keeper." Obviously it's a patriarchal gang of men. But they got tattooed on their neck, all of them, like hundreds of them. "My brother's keeper." And they surfed, but then they also went and trained jiu-jitsu. So that when they got in fights on the beach, they'd be able to do really well. Hawaiians kind of did this too. As pathetic of a like a higher calling as that might be, based on the list of options that are available to you as a human being, it's still something greater than yourself. Positive psychology studied what makes people leave jobs. And if you feel that your colleagues are depending on you, people will stay in their job even when other jobs that pay much more money come along. That money, generally speaking, is not enough to motivate people to leave one job for another when they feel a connection to their colleagues. Sometimes people will refuse advancement in the same company so they can continue to work with the same, and this is very commonplace. They actually studied it formally in positive psychology. That the greatest ingredient to human happiness is to be a part of something greater than yourself, and then the next question becomes, what is that greater thing that I'm a part of? What do I value more than myself? Anyway, so the verse uses a term, Sreyas. Sreyas is a very, very common term in classical Hinduism. It is not so well known in modern neo-Hinduism. But if you were to look at traditional Hinduism and Indic philosophy, the term Sreyas gets used a lot. Sreyas, and it's usually contrasted to another term. These two terms are found together. And they're sister terms. Interrelated terms. Who knows what the other term is? I know you guys do. Who else knows? Yeah, I know. Everybody knows. Okay, let's go with you. Preyas. That's right. That's right. Sreyas and Preyas. These terms are first. These words go back all the way to the Katha Upanishad, all the way to the Rig Veda. But they're used in this philosophical sense in the beginning in the Katha Upanishad, one of the oldest Upanishadic literatures, a multi-thousand-year-old piece of literature that predates the Gita and is, the core of our tradition. And when we get into really heavy philosophical debates, then we take it back to the Upanishads. It's like the constitutional law for our movement. You have, additional laws, but like at a certain point, like when it gets really complicated, you're arguing a really big issue, states are disagreeing with stuff, and something goes above the level that can be adjudicated between states or what have you, it gets taken all the way up to the Supreme Court, and those Supreme Court justices are all experts specifically in constitutional law, because all subsequent laws in this country at a federal and a state and even a municipal level have to not contradict the Constitution. It's the ultimate the buck stops here spot for our country. The Upanishads are like that in our tradition. And so there's a famous verse. Sreyas cha preyas cha manusya metastau samparitya vivinakti diraha shreyahi dhiro abhi preyaso vrinite preyamando yogakshemat advrinite. Sreyas cha preyas cha manusya etan tau. Both Sreyas and Preyas come to a person. Dhira samparitya vivinakti. But a sober person, a thoughtful person, will examine them and distinguish amongst them. Shreya hi dhira abhi preyasa vrinite. And the sober, thoughtful person will choose Shreyas. Manda preya yogakshema vrinnate. Shemat vrinnate. But the foolish person will choose Preyas. Both Shreyas and Preyas come to a person. But a thoughtful person doesn't just accept them. They examine them and they think about them. And the thoughtful person accepts Shreyas. And the foolish person accepts Preyas for the sake of their body. Shreyas comes from the Sanskrit dhatu Shri, which means to lean on or to take refuge in. It gives rise to Sanskrit words like ashraya, to give shelter to. It also becomes the term Shri, which means beauty, opulence, and auspiciousness. And so Shreyas is that beautiful thing that you can anchor yourself to and lean on, that has ultimate value and is truly an anchor point or a refuge in this world. Preyas comes from Pri, which is where you get words like prema and priti from. Preyas is what is enjoyable. And so Preyas refers to things which are sensually enjoyable. Money, wealth, fame, beauty, a cushy life, kind of lavish pleasures in this world. And so both things will come your way in life. A thoughtful person looks at this and thinks about the two of them. And thinks about, well, I have a body. My body's not going to long endure. All the animals have bodies, but I've got something special. I don't have claws. I have these just totally pathetic nails. I have canine teeth. I've got something halfway between a... Oh, you know this thing that we do with our jaw? Only herbivores have that. FYI. Omnivores, even if they get 5% of their diet from meat, they have a fixed jaw. This is for chewing cud. So, I got a weak jaw. I got no claws. My teeth are all blunted. They're canine teeth in name only. I got to wear clothes. I don't have the hair on my body to survive out in the wild, even in Southern California. What to speak of anywhere else. Even in a mild climate like Southern California or San Diego, we have to all wear clothes regularly. Not just for modesty's sake, but because you'd actually get... We have central heating and air. We need to cook our food. Like from an animalistic perspective, I'm not that amazing. But I've got this mind that can think about things. Think about who I am, why I'm here, what's the purpose of life. That's what makes me special. That's what makes our tribe of human beings special. And so Preyas is there. I got to keep body and soul together. But I'm not going to spend my life building sandcastles like a child for my whole life. Sometimes people do that. Like there's a group of the Vajrayana Buddhists from Tibet. They do those really elaborate sand designs. And then the mandalas in the sand, colored sand, and then they just destroy them. They finish them, work on them for weeks on end, and then just destroy them, start over again. But they're a nihilistic tradition, so they kind of pick their side of the fence. They're nihilists, and so that's what they're going for. If there is actually a source of everything, what better thing to dedicate your life to looking for? If there is some truth that ties all of us together, if there's some reality that joins us all, if there's some centrifugal force in the universe, some cynosure of the universe, some center point, some hub of the wheel, some hub of the whorl, of the lotus of this world, let me find that. Let me search that out, see where I came from, see what it's all about. Actually, this is what everybody's doing. Even the Big Bang Theory and abiogenesis and natural selection, the kind of standard boilerplate atheistic model for the existence of the world, is a theory of where everything came from and how everything evolved from that point. Everybody's doing this. Everybody's ultimately a cosmologist. Everybody who thinks about it for long enough has to start looking for, where do I come from? We have a natural, innate tendency to seek truth, to seek knowledge, to seek first principles, to examine our surroundings, to look for what ties us all together. So a thoughtful person will see the Preyas, which comes in everybody's life. We have it common with the animals. Some enjoyment, some suffering. It just comes along with the human form of life. Samparitya avivinakta. You'll examine it and you'll think about it. You'll contemplate it. You'll decipher it. And then the thoughtful person, instead of choosing what's merely pleasing, will choose what's ultimately beneficial. And their life will be lived pursuing higher truths, higher principles. And once you accept that, then it's a question of how high does it go? How deep does it go? How far does the rabbit hole go? What's the best thing I can study? What are the first principles of all reality? How much can I know? How much can I see? And so the usage of this word Sreyas, gatate Sreyase, by which one strives in pursuit of the ultimate benefit, it has a long history. The term itself is part of a much older literature that predates this text by thousands of years, that determine that there are these two tendencies in a person's life, where you can pursue what's easy, what's enjoyable, or you can pursue what's good and valuable and ultimately beneficial. And this text is telling us, don't spend your life like an animal, wandering around, feeding yourself. If, in comparison, even half an hour of life spent deeply contemplating the nature of your existence, that will inspire you to begin the real hero's journey towards the absolute. And that is a life worth living. And so, when you look at our temple and our chanting of the holy name. We are striving, we are crying out to Krishna. We're striving with our speech, with our hearts, to reach out and touch the divine. That's what's happening. There's an unstated premise that the thing you're trying to touch is beyond your ability to touch. It's so great. It's so magnificent. It goes beyond your small ability to reach out and touch. So what can you do? You can open up your heart and cry out and be open, and then that gracious truth will descend upon you. And so our primary practice, we're striving, but the striving is a striving of becoming open, becoming receptive, becoming sincere, becoming humble. That's why we chant. Even you look at our lifestyle, our vegan lifestyle, our celibate/monogamous lifestyle, our sober lifestyle. We don't live this lifestyle just randomly because of some Victorian sense of ideals and we don't want to go to hell and we want to go to heaven and this is evil and this is good. It's not like that. We really want to be able to focus on meaningful things in life. And when you get too wrapped up in sensualism, when you get too wrapped up in material things, you just get diverted. You get spun out. You can't make the best use of your time. And so just as a pragmatic principle, just as exercise in pragmatism, we don't do certain things so that we're fresh and we're on point. Like if you were running, somebody just won the Boston half marathon, the New York half marathon, and dropped dead. They crossed the finish line and then dropped dead. They might not even want it. They might just finish it. I can't even remember. You figure if they won it, they would be dropping dead. They'd be in phenomenal shape. So I'm just going to go with they finished it and then dropped dead. If you had to run the race of your life, you wouldn't be partying the day before. You wouldn't be arguing with some stranger on the internet about cats or something like that. You'd be focused. Most important day of your life, you'd be focused. But every day has the ability to be the most important day of our life. Every day has the ability to yield us incredible rewards. If you want to approach the infinite, a great thing is that that infinite wants to approach you too. And if you're receptive, then it'll come to you. And that like journey of 1,000 miles is really a journey within your own heart. And an attempt to become really sincere and really receptive. And then you find that the kingdom of God and all truth you could ever want to know is within you. It's already there. You've just been blocking it. You get out of the way and like all sorts of wisdom starts to come to you. And then you don't want to waste your time doing negative things because you don't want to mess up this great thing you got going. And so when you look at our lifestyle, our practice, and everything, it's our own special, beautiful, exotic, cultural expression of this core principle. And this core principle is common to every spiritual tradition on the planet. They've all come to the realization that this world is not for long, that there is something above it, that there is a higher principle, and that you should attach yourself to that higher principle and strive after that, and that's a life worth living. That's the hero's journey. That's the search for truth. That's the search for meaning. And even just starting on that, even just getting inspired to start that is more valuable than the full life of doing a whole lot of nothing. All right. What's your feedback? What do you guys think about this? What thoughts do you have? What comments? Questions? Yes.
You better pray, ya, make a Sreyas decision.
Ouch. Very good. Yes. Right? Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to stay sincere. And a lot of times people, they're looking for sincerity. They're looking for a way to make it through a tough tough time, and they'll reach out and grab a book and just randomly open it to a given page and hope that they find what they're looking for. I think that's better than going and buying a bottle of something. But I do think that the random game of chance, looking for inspiration and just flipping the pages, isn't the best thing we can do. I think if we're really sincere, we should keep company with other sincere people. And then when we're faltering a little bit, like if you ever watch Navy SEALs going through basic training, because somehow that's a thing and people watch that. It was funny, an ex-Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, who I follow him because every morning he's up at 4:30 and getting on people's cases. So he's kind of like a drill sergeant, get you up in the morning, get you going. He goes out and works out. I chant Jocko, but it's the same. We're both doing, what we think is important. Somebody wrote to him and said, I need you to yell at me and give me some inspiration. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm a Navy SEAL. We don't yell at you to give you inspiration. We yell at you to get you to quit. Because if you're so weak that you need us to inspire you to keep you going, we don't want you on our team. We're looking for self-starters. And then we yell at you to test you to see if you're going to quit. He dropped the mic and walked off and I was like, wow, that was heavy. One of the things they do is they make you work as teams, and they give you impossible tasks to accomplish as a team. Like they'll ask you to pick up a 600-pound log, and you got to hold it above your head for an hour and 15 minutes. But there's just no way you can do it. People get weak. People are different heights. So the other guy can hold it. You have to lower, which makes it more stressful for you because you're in kind of a half press position, but their arms are locked out. You guys following me? And it gets really difficult. And guys are dropping off. They're jacking their shoulders up. Shoulders getting dislocated. Some people drop off. Some people stick with it. But the thing they're looking for is they're looking for that sincerity that you're working as a group and you're picking up the slack for each other. And somehow there's a group dynamic that won't die. And even though individual members may suffer sometimes, the group then holds them up. And with this incredible degree of self-motivated sincerity and a powerful group, they can do things which are practically speaking impossible. I mean, more people die in training for the SEALs than actually die in war as SEALs. They give you hypothermia on a regular basis. They make you go crazy from lack of sleep. The one thing they don't do is make you fast and make you work on an empty stomach. They fill you up with enough calories. You always have a caloric surplus, but they'll totally drive you insane and give you hypothermia. And they've got doctors watching the whole time because people are getting taken off in the ambulance. And if you get taken off in an ambulance, you get dumped out. It's not like, oh, you broke and your arm broke and you dumped out. They'll remove you and maybe you get a chance the next time around, but you don't get credit for breaking. You get credit for making it through. So you got to persevere and make it through. I think we should all cultivate that type of perseverant, really serious life and death attitude about our spirituality and how important it is to us. And we should look for daily inspiration the way we look for daily food to keep ourselves sustained. And so in addition to praying, we should also keep company with spiritually minded people so that when we are faltering, we can lean on them. And they'll be our stick of support. And we can, arm in arm, together, we can make it through. More feedback. Yeah.
I like how you simplified why we live these lives of discipline. It's not that we have this Victorian sense of good and evil. It's that we see this goal and we're like, all right, how are we going to maximize our training? What's the best way to focus to get there?
Like Mike Tyson was celibate before his fights. It's kind of a thing with boxers. They'll be celibate prior to a big fight. This is very common. There's different theories about what you should do in terms of personal chastity and athletic performance. There's different theories that abound. But at least one of the old school ones was to be fully celibate, to leave your wife, leave your family, and to live almost as a monastic, to prepare for some incredible trial of arms. And he used to do that. That was an old school boxing thing he used to do. Serious people do big stuff to succeed in what's important to them. Like when a new iPhone comes out, people will stay up for days and camp out in front of the Apple store. Like that's like, it's just so important to them that they're going to go sit out in front of the Apple store for days on end. And when I was a kid, people would go and sleep, when a band was going to play a concert, people would go and sleep outside for days in front of the venue where they were selling tickets to get tickets. People perform all sorts of crazy austerities. Like the people who perform the most austerities in the world, practically speaking, on like a regular basis that you'll see, are drug addicts. They do the craziest stuff you've ever seen. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning and they're like hitchhiking hundreds of miles to try. You know what I mean? And so lusty people, drug addicts, are famous for performing incredibly dangerous feats to satisfy themselves. We should take seriously our spiritual journey. We should fight for it. Not because we have some old world sense of values, but because we really want to get the prize. We want to make it. And we take it as seriously as people take their hobbies and more. And so our lifestyle is reflective of a group of people who really deeply thought about what was going to give them an edge in spiritual pursuits. One more. Yeah.
I'm surprised that the study of value didn't include truth.
I think truth and goodness are considered to be synonymous in axiology. I think goodness, by its very definition, is true. And it's the highest truth. It's true with a capital T. And it represents a higher truth rather than a lower truth. So I think a very argument for moral philosophy in general, any argument for moral philosophy in terms of determining what is good, is what is the highest truth that a person can follow. And so I think the reason why it doesn't include truth is because true statements and facts are used to build value systems. And those value systems are conceived of by their theoreticians as being the ultimate manifestation of that truth and the fleshed out beatific vision of that truth. So what is beautiful is what is most true. What is good is what is most true. And that's why it doesn't stand as a third thing. Does that make sense? Although in Socrates, he did talk about the good, the true, and the beautiful as epithets for the one that was worth pursuing. And so sometimes truth does actually get mentioned as its own thing. But if you wanted to reconcile it, you would say that truth is subsumed within and contained within goodness and beauty. And in fact, goodness and beauty are further manifestations and a fleshing out of the ultimate implications of truth. Did you follow that? One more. Yeah.
It seems like for most people who are closer in the range between human and saintly, that are closer to their humanness, that when they're like situated in all their primary needs and like all the other values of life, then they can actually pursue Sreyas, the ultimate benefit. So I was just wondering, I can see an argument.
Sure. Yeah, I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, I wanted to hear.
I think, and I'll make it quick because I don't want us to go over 60 minutes and then the IGTV thing gets all messed up and it's hard to post. So those are my parameters. And I think I've got 1 minute and 15 seconds left. I think we should lash ourselves to the highest truth we can conceive of. Then we can reach out and have some fun. But as we're reaching out to have some fun, we should be firmly yoked to this and never let go of it. And then however much we can reach out, however much like low-hanging fruit, whatever we can reach out and do and enjoy, we should do. But we should never let that which matters the least take precedence over that which matters the most. And when Srila Prabhupada met his guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in 1922 at Ultodanga in Calcutta, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told him, you should go to the West and share Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said, no, we have to take care of our home and free ourselves from the yoke of British rule. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's answer was, that which matters the most should never depend on that which matters the least. The very nature of spirituality is that goal takes precedence, and it's not a derivative goal or a secondary goal, which is founded on like a basic platform of materialism. Rather, it becomes your baseline goal, and then you dabble in materialism, but you become an expert in spirituality. If you don't do that, you end up spending your whole life doing this, and maybe you make some kind of, poor, crippled attempt in your old age. But it's never enough. We're the opposite. When we're young and we're virile and we're strong, we want to really make advancement. Because when we're old and we're choking, if we haven't made some advancement, how are we going to pass that final test? Our life is a preparation for those later moments when even our mind might not be agreeing with us. That's a quick answer. I do think what you've said is very commonplace. And in a lot of ways you can say that one of our primary arguments is against people who have that mindset, trying to convince them to reverse the order of operations and not put the cart before the horse. All right, let's do a little cheer time. Thank you very much.